Okay, we're going to try this again because I just recorded an entire podcast with my microphone on mute. Hi, folks. This is Nick Calavera, and you're listening to the Kingdom of Monsters podcast coming at you live on this beautiful Black Friday here in America. So, how did we get here? What am I doing here, anyway? Because chances are you know me from Twitter, and if you know me from Twitter, you know me for drawing what I call surreal horror pinups. You don't know me from my ability to talk. Although I think I have a pretty good voice now that you can finally hear it. So, what are we doing here? Basically, it's this. Over the last couple of months, I've been kind of frustrated by Twitter as a platform. And I don't mean that as a way to meet people or as a way to promote my art or promote the art of people who I like and who I work with. Because I think it's great for them. But I have a really hard time expressing myself on Twitter because of the character limit. And there's been so many times where somebody will post something and I want to be part of the discussion and I want to express my viewpoint, but I don't want to post 8 different tweets to try and get my point across. And so really the point of this, the point of me sitting down and making a recording is just to give people a way to get to know me better, to give me a platform where I can properly express myself, and you can tell when I'm joking and you can tell when I'm being serious because you can hear the tone of my voice. Because I'm always worried that I'm coming off as like super serious or super critical when I don't mean to be. And I hope I haven't done that with any of you. But the other thing too is I want to have an outlet where I can get to know the people who follow me. And hopefully now, having this podcast, having this place where I can talk about whatever is on my mind, it's going to give us another way that we can interact with each other and get to know each other. And my hope is that I'll get some of my friends on here and we can all sort of collaborate and push things that we're working on and have a platform to promote it. In that spirit, let me talk about myself a little bit because my Twitter profile is notoriously sparse. For the longest time, all it said is, I'm a skeleton that draws comics. And it wasn't until I collaborated with the Monster Porn podcast, I designed a t-shirt for them. By the way, you can buy that at www.teespring.com/store/monsterporn. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So it wasn't until it wasn't until I worked with the Monster Porn podcast that one of the creators, Brett, he sent me a DM and he said, "Hey, do you have an artist bio beyond I'm a skeleton that draws comics?" And I was like, let me think about that. Because really nobody had ever asked me before. And, you know, I was used to really being very anonymous on the internet. I was used to my art not getting a lot of attention. So it was never something that I really felt that I needed to do because up until that point, nobody really cared who I was behind the screen. But I'm going to try and give you an idea of who I am and who you're following. So, let's get started. There's a small chance that you might recognize my voice, and that's because I used to be part of the Let's Play community on YouTube. If you don't know what Let's Play videos are, a Let's Play is basically where somebody sits down and they record themselves playing a video game, and they offer commentary about the video game as they're playing. Probably my favorite person who does that is a Let's Player by the name of Deceased Crab. My favorite video of his, and you should absolutely go to YouTube and watch it if you haven't yet, is he does a playthrough of the Nintendo Entertainment System game Monster Party. Monster Party is this obscure horror platformer released by Bandai. It's not a good game, but it's so crazy and different that you can't help but like it. It was one of my favorite games as a kid growing up. Still one of my favorite games now. The other reason why Monster Party is important is because the theme for the Monster Party video game is also the intro music for this podcast. So there's a little trivia for you. And so I've always liked video games. I've always liked horror. And I looked at this and I thought, hey, I can do that. So I started uploading videos of myself playing video games. And I never was that popular. I did have a couple of friends in the community. Mike Mnemonic was one Let's Player that I had a good relationship with. He always made good videos, by the way, if you ever get a chance to watch him on YouTube. Probably my most popular uploads were a series called Let's Play Dr. Chaos. And Dr. Chaos is a really interesting game. It came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System, I believe it was in 1987, the same year that The Adventure of Link, the second Zelda game, came out. And what makes it so interesting to me is that it's really a very early example of a survival horror game, but that before that genre existed, or before we had a name for it anyway. And so in Dr. Chaos, you play as Michael Chaos. Yeah, that's the last name that they gave you. You play as Michael Chaos. And your main goal is to save your brother Jin after your mansion is overrun with monsters crossing over through an interdimensional warp gate. And so, like, if that doesn't grab your attention, if that doesn't make you want to sit down and play that game, I don't know what to tell you. But what does the game play like? The game's basically about careful item management. You pick up items, med kits, bullets, and you got to make sure that they last as you try to fight your way through this mansion with all these horrible things that are swarming it. But the real horror of the game is not being able to open doors because the copy of the game that you rented didn't come with an instruction manual. That's a truly terrifying experience in the pre-internet days, and that was my experience when I first rented that game. So that's a quick summary of some of my creative outlets that aren't directly related to drawing. But let's talk about my art and how my art ended up on the internet to begin with. Back in the mid-2000s, I was an active poster on the website Newgrounds, and I like to hang around the art forum. And for people who don't know, Newgrounds was, before YouTube existed, Newgrounds was a website that primarily consisted of user-created content. Mostly what was shown on that website was animation and video games made using a program called Flash. But it wasn't an art site. Like, don't think, it's not like a DeviantArt or an Instagram or something like that where, people posted art regularly. It was really a site for people who made animation and people who program video games. And it happened to spawn an art forum at one point because often people who made video games were not very good at drawing. So they would look for artists who could provide art to be used in their video games. And that's how the art forum came to be. And that was where I hung out. I managed to find my way into a lot of different and interesting events that were happening around the time that I was posting, which is the mid-2000s. I happened to be part of a handful of artists who participated in the first art calendar contest that Newgrounds had. I almost got my art published that way. I was so close, and I got beat out by somebody who drew a Christmas-themed version of the character that I drew. If you're wondering what I drew the character Blue Rabbit from the Another Day series on Newgrounds. It was a series of animated films that follow this character Blue Rabbit. It was animated by the Super Flash Brothers. If you haven't seen it yet, you should go check it out. They're all very well made, very emotionally evocative. Yeah, that's the word I'm going to use. But good stuff. And I got beat out because somebody put a Christmas hat on the Blue Rabbit. So, there you go. After that, though, I actually got a little bit of a name for myself on the art forum. And I was invited to participate in a number of different collaborations. The one that I remember most fondly was the Metropolis Disaster Art Collab, where we all drew different pictures of monsters destroying cities. But I was in some other projects, and the one that's the most infamous is somebody said, well, let's make an art forum video game. And they decided, hey, it'll be a side-scrolling shooter like Gradius. I ended up, there were going to be different levels, and each level had a different theme. I was put in charge of the surreal level, which makes sense if you've seen my art. And what we were told is, create all these art assets. We have a programmer that's going to put it all together into a video game and make it work. Okay, great, right? So we start doing this. I have a team of about 4 other artists that I'm supervising. We start making art. We're putting out concepts. We're coming up with ideas. We're trying to figure out how to map out our level. And about 2 weeks into this, we lose the programmer. And so the whole project falls apart. So at that point, I kind of stopped posting art for a while. I didn't post publicly for a very long time because I was just feeling a little burnt out at that point. And honestly, I never really fit into the Newgrounds community. And it's a site that's always been about animation and video games, and art's always kind of been an afterthought. So I took a break. And I didn't post any art again until 2012, actually. And the reason why I started posting again in 2012 was because I sat down and I started drawing a comic called Delirium. And what Delirium was sort of my take on Heavy Metal Magazine. And so it was my attempt to try and draw, these sci-fi, fantasy, weird comics that were a little more mature themed than like your typical superhero stuff. There were 2 main stories that ran in Delirium, right? So the first one was Kingdom of Monsters. And you might recognize Kingdom of Monsters because I still use that as my screen name here on Twitter. But Kingdom of Monsters, what was it about? In a nutshell, I had a main character. Her name was Tara. She was a former Miss America. One day, an angel crashes through her window. She gets attacked by a robot with drill hands. They escape. They end up looking for a magic book that's going to stop this interdimensional invasion of monsters. I thought it was cool. The other main story that ran in Delirium was something called GERL, and that's GERL. GERL is an acronym. It stands for Genetically Engineered Relic Life Form. And basically what that one was about is there's this biomechanical girl, right? Part machine, part living tissue. She wakes up in a lab with amnesia, and the rest of it is about her trying to fight her way out and recover her memories and figure out what she was doing before she got there and what she needs to do next. And if you haven't heard of either of those, that's okay. Delirium did not sell very well. It sold notoriously poorly, in fact. And it didn't get reviewed that well either by the one person who did review it. I'll give a shout out to the blog. I don't think it actively updates anymore, but that was 365 Zines. I don't recall. That might have been Josh, who was the guy who ran that review blog. But yeah, he was not real impressed with my efforts. And that's okay. So, Delirium. That's when I start drawing comics seriously. It doesn't do that great. I take another break, another long break, actually, where it was just, I wanted to take time to work on my art, to fix the things that I thought I needed to fix, to try and get better at the things that I thought that I could improve. And then, after a lot of procrastinating and a lot of delaying and a lot of worrying that this wasn't going to go anywhere, I finally decided to post on Twitter. So my first post on Twitter was in December 2017, and I actually got off to a really good start. I had about 80 followers by the end of my first month, and currently I have just a little over 1,000, so that's a lot of growth that I didn't expect to happen in this past year, and I still really don't know what happened there. But that pretty much brings you up to date with where we're at today. I mean, what's been going on recently, there's a bunch of people I should mention. So the first big commission work that I did, Hawkart, who is working on a comic book called Rancid right now, let me do some promotional art for the comic, which you might have seen. If you haven't yet, you should check it out. You can see it at the Twitter page at Rancid Comic. Monster Porn, the Monster Porn podcast. They were nice enough to let me design a t-shirt for them. It just got released about a week ago. That was such a big deal. And I still can't believe that they trust me with that responsibility. And I did almost ruin it because I ended up accidentally drawing tentacle porn as I was making the design for that. Someday I'll tell the story behind that, but this podcast is not the time where I want to get into that. But if you haven't yet, you should go subscribe to the Monster Porn Podcast on iTunes. Follow them on Twitter, and it is Monster Porn, but porn is spelled PR0N, which some of you who are familiar with LeetSpeak, that probably makes sense to you. And then currently, right now, I am in the middle of a collaboration with the Octoberpod YouTube channel. They have asked me, their very first video was a retelling of the story, the Edgar Allan Poe story, Hop Frog. And they asked me to do new illustrations for that story, and I'm in the middle of working on that right now. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend that you go follow Octoberpod on YouTube. You can also follow them on Twitter at OctoberpodVHS. And that's everything that I'm working on right now. Well, actually, that's not true. There's a couple of things that are in the works that are still, we'll call them secret projects right now. There's two people in particular that I'm collaborating with. One of them is at Toxic Heart Anime. The other is Artiste Melissa, at Artiste Melissa. Artiste is spelled Artiste. Melissa is Melissa. There is a project that's a little far off right now. It's going to come out probably in May or June of 2019. We're in talks to do some illustrations. There's also, I have a little secret project of my own, which we're calling Phantom Light, which we're probably going to start working on sometime in December. I'm hoping that we'll actually post progress from that sometime in early 2019. And that's really all I have to say. I want to use the rest of this time to just say thank you to some people, because I really, I don't know how to say this exactly, but I never expected people to care as much as they do about what I've posted, and I never expected that I would matter as much as I seem to some of the people that I've met on Twitter. And so I have a short list of people that I want to give shout outs to, and I want to say thank you to them, because I don't think that I would be here doing this right now if it weren't for them. And it's not a complete list. This isn't everybody. I could never make a complete list of everybody that I need to thank, because anybody that's followed me or liked anything I've posted or retweeted or commented or recommended me to somebody else has helped me out and helped me get here. But a couple of people that I want to make sure that I mention them. One is the YouTuber Miss Monster. She has a horror narration channel. You can follow her at It's Miss Monster on Twitter. And I've always been a fan of her. She gave me one of my first big shout outs. I got a bunch of follows from her because she looked at my art and said, hey, this guy's a good artist. You go follow him. The other person is Elder's Vault. Elder's Vault, also a YouTube horror channel. He has an awesome Discord server, by the way. Look him up, Elder's Vault, on Twitter. Go check out the Discord if you haven't yet. Great community, great people. Love talking about horror, love talking about alternate reality games, everything related to that. So if you're a fan of that, go talk to them. Christopher Spence, you might know him as at Hominid Art on Twitter. Awesome artist. Always supportive of other artists. He gave me a lot of shout outs and retweets when I was first starting out on Twitter. I don't know if they officially announced this, but it looks like he is doing the illustrations for Gauntlet magazine, which is a role-playing magazine. So you should check that out if you haven't yet. Pixel Occult, at Pixel Occult on Twitter. Probably one of the artists that I respect the most on Twitter, and he's always been somebody that, I can message him in a DM and he'll get back to me, and I can express myself honestly with him. But if you haven't yet, check out his work. He has some awesome tarot decks out. He just released the Adorabyssal. Did I say that right? I don't really know how I'm supposed to say this. The Adorabyssal Oracle deck. They just got that kickstarted, just got it released. I just got mine in the mail about a week ago. I need to post about that on Twitter, actually. Remind me to do that in the comments. But he has some other good tarot decks out there, too. The Neon Moon Tarot. I think that's what it's called. I hope I got that right. Oh, God, I should have written stuff down before I did this, but it's okay. Anyway, check out his work if you haven't yet. OctoberPod, at OctoberPod VHS on Twitter, YouTube channel, OctoberPod. You need to follow them. You need to watch the videos if you haven't yet. They actually started promoting me a long time before I even thought to promote myself. And so that's why I want to mention them. And it's been really great that I can work with them now on the Hop Frog story. This was, you might have heard of it before. It was codenamed Razor Doll at one point. Just as an aside, the reason why it was called Razor Doll it had to do with the hairstyle of one of the main characters, and that hairstyle was taken from the character Razor, who is a character in a video game called Maniac Mansion, which was an old point-and-click adventure game released by LucasArts back in the early 80s there. And again, just a little bit of trivia for you. Who else do I need to thank? At Hawk Art, because they gave me an opportunity to draw promotional art for them. I got a lot of attention for it. I was really excited to be part of that project. I'm hoping I'll get to do other art for them as their comic Rancid moves along further in development. So go check them out if you haven't yet. The Monster Porn Podcast. If you like horror, and I don't know how you can't if you're following me on Twitter, you need to go follow the Monster Porn Podcast. Brett, especially, I want to give a shout out to him because he's the one that gave me an opportunity to do this really high profile illustration job for them. And Brett and Matt, who are the creators of Monster Porn, both just promoted the hell out of me while we were doing this, and I really appreciate it. So go listen to their podcast, Monster Porn. Go follow them on Twitter. It's Monster Porn. Porn is spelled PR0N on Twitter. Who else do I need to thank? Melissa Peterson, one of my favorite artists here on Twitter. We're going to collaborate soon. We're going to do some work together. If you haven't seen her work yet, go check it out. She has this amazing style that's this combination of gothic elements and this like Disney princess aesthetic. I've never seen anything like it before. And her Twitter is artiste Melissa at ARTISTE Melissa. Melissa. I am Amberly. Amberly, she's such a great person. She's so supportive. I think that she probably believes in me a lot more than I believe in myself most of the time. And I'm grateful to have her as a friend. Gwendolyn Drayton, she's somebody that believes that everyone can make art. And she's a great blogger. Go check her out on Twitter if you haven't yet. And the last person is Marina, Toxic Heart Anime. If you don't follow her yet and you follow me, you need to go follow her too. And she's somebody that really has inspired me with her own art, and she's been a great friend to me on here. And really, I don't know if I would still be doing this if she wasn't on here too, so I want to make sure that I give her a shout out. I guess this is enough. Let's wrap this up. I still can't get over that I've got over 1,000 people who care enough about what I'm doing to follow me, and I hope that I keep making things that you guys find interesting and that you want to talk about and pass on to other people. In the meantime, I think this is going to be posted on YouTube, so what do they always say? Like it if you like it, dislike it if you don't like it, subscribe. This has been Nick Calavera with the Kingdom of Monsters podcast.